So I'm Jay. I play the role of creative director at Circus. We're a London-based creative studio, and we specialize in using virtual and immersive technology to create branded experiences and also to solve real commercial challenges. And what I'd like to do in this session is to explore how this technology has really been moving from hype to hard return on investment, and we'll include some real stories from brands that you know. So first of all, what I want to do is just look at what we mean by virtual, just to define it so we're really clear. And fundamentally, it refers to a suite of technology that allows us to do things that we can't do in real life. And these are really the tools of our trade. So the first of these three is 360 media. So fundamentally taking what would otherwise be a flat experience designed for a rectangular screen and making it immersive. Like, for example, you might find in virtual tours or 360 video, really putting the viewer inside of the action. The second type is virtual reality, something that takes us outside of ourselves, transports us somewhere we're not, and ultimately delivers experiences like no other medium. And thirdly, augmented reality, a portable overlay which enables us to bring objects and effects into our world. Now, there's a couple of other bits of terminology you may have come across, like XR and MR, which I think is just worth defining and why they're not included here. So MR, if you've heard of it, refers to mixed reality. That's effectively where you're seeing an augmented reality effect, but in a VR headset. And XR stands for extended reality, which is kind of the umbrella term for all of them. So because those two really collapse to AR and VR, that's why we keep it simple and just think about these two delivery mechanisms. Before we move on, I'd be really interested, just by a show of hands, who's tried at least one of these? Okay, that's pretty much everybody. Okay, keep your hand up if you tried two of them. And keep your hand up if you tried all three. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so I would say about half the room still got their hands up at the end. So interestingly, if I'd asked that question, say 5 years ago, I would say maybe 50% of that number would still have their hands up. So there's been a real increase in awareness of the technology, and that's been really exciting for us as creators. The thing that's made the biggest difference is this guy. So COVID was obviously responsible for catalyzing loads of changes in terms of social and commercial conventions. And in particular, what it did is it threw into stark relief the preciousness of shared experiences against the gloom that we all felt of being disconnected and stuck in our homes. So what I want to do is tell the story of how this changed the technology landscape around us. Now, in previous years before COVID, things like virtual tours, virtual reality were kind of nice to haves. They were demos, gimmicks, a little bit over there in terms of the marketing landscape. But during COVID, they became a lifeline. They became solutions to not being able to be together in person, and not just over Zoom. So they allowed us to have experiences from home that normally we'd have out in the real world. For example, universities needing to attract students for the coming year's intake, innovators who needed to keep continuing prototyping and collaborating at a distance, and even things like virtual tourism took off because people are stuck in their homes and there's an itch to travel. So all of these use cases started to emerge, and the technology provided a solution. But whenever there's a spike in interest in the new technology, a bubble tends to form around it. So we had a period of hype, which was where it was projected that these not new, but newly relevant technologies would change everything, right? So think of, for example, Mark Zuckerberg talking about the metaverse, right? Where we're all told that we'd be spending large parts of our lives in VR headsets, and we all went, no thanks. There was Apple, who started work on the Apple Vision Pro, to pushing the idea of kind of spatial computing, that we would all be wearing our laptops on our heads, and we all went, I don't have $3,500 to spend on a sort of laptop, so no thanks again. But as the dust settled over the rubble of these experiments, what has emerged is a set of tangible use cases, ways that these kinds of solutions can be assets for brands and businesses, delivering value and reducing costs. So looking ahead, as audiences continue to grow and the channels swell, we project that they'll also become revenue streams, really generating income for those businesses that choose to invest in them. Until, like all technologies, they will one day be consigned to the shelf of history. But not yet. Before we get into some examples, just another way to look at this trend is this graph. So this is showing adoption of VR headsets, showing millions of devices shipped worldwide to consumers in white and to commercial buyers in red. Now, what you're not seeing on this graph is the very long flat tail pre-2017, which was where VR was really struggling to gain mass appeal. But what you can see is from 2020, it really finally, after many years of struggling, starts to pick up as COVID, as I said before, brought it into the limelight, and familiarity with the technology started to translate into engagement. Now, there's two main things to notice in this graph. One is the white bar, the consumer adoption. You can see that it's actually starting to plateau off. And the reason for that is the number one use case for VR amongst consumers is gaming. And there is a limit to the number of gamers in the society, and there's a limit to the number of those gamers who want to play games in VR. So at the moment, you're sort of reaching a saturation point amongst that audience. However, the other thing to notice is the red bar. That's where the commercial buyers are. So that's showing a huge expansion in commercial applications, which are really exploding. And this is the bar that's going to become dominant in the long term. And that's where the opportunity for brands really lies. Now, within that red bar, these are just some of the brands that we've had direct contact with that we know are investing in virtual technology. So amongst them, for example, you'll find an engineering firm who train thousands of staff remotely, no travel costs, no downtime. You'll find a healthcare provider who used immersive simulations to train clinicians, leading to better outcomes more fast and more safely. You'll find a consumer goods brand who launched new products in a virtual showroom so that buyers can explore instantly and close deals quicker. You'll find a tech company that ran virtual onboarding for new hires across multiple countries, and everybody starts clean on day one with no delays. So again and again, companies are finding ways to use the technology to solve real commercial challenges. I'm a child of the 80s. I love a countdown. And if you don't know who that is, you're too young and we can't be friends. But there are obviously loads of use cases for these technologies, new ones emerging each week. And what I want to do is run down what we see as the top 5 killer applications for this technology. We'll give some examples of how brands are using it to transform what they're doing. And I'm going to shamelessly lean on our own case studies. By the way, all of these can apply both B2B or B2C. So regardless of what your area of interest is, they should all be relevant to you. So we're at number 5, interactive storytelling. So people, users, will spend 2 to 10 times longer engaging with a piece of content if they can interact with it, compared with, for example, reading information on a page or passively watching a video. You'll also find them more attracted to it in the first place, they convert more readily, and ultimately forge closer connections and deeper associations with the subject matter. So that's why we try to think of really changing the paradigm in terms of how particular experiences work on the web. So web design is really anchored in the world of print publishing. We talk about web pages, we talk about web publishing, we scroll down flat 2D surfaces with text and pictures on. But there's no reason to think of devices as screens. We prefer to think of them as windows. They can be portals through which you can see other worlds, where you can take control of the direction you look to discover things outside of the frame of your device, where you can look left, right, up, down, even travel forwards and backwards through a 3-dimensional space. And that really changes the way that you design experiences on the web fundamentally. So one simple example is the classic virtual tour, using 360 imagery to allow people to step inside a space on whatever device they happen to be using. It allows us to create digital twins. We can create digital versions of real-world experiences and put them online to reach larger audiences for longer at no additional cost. And in this particular case, this is a project we worked on with UK Parliament to take the £80 million restoration of Big Ben and make it accessible to a global audience. And in it, you can play with a 3D model of the Elizabeth Tower, you can spin it around, you can step inside to see beautiful high-resolution 360 views inside the tower. You can place yourself inside the building, and you can even kind of lean in and investigate features exactly as you would have done if you were stood there in the real world. So as a result of this, many times more people have been able to enjoy this historic building than ever could have visited in person, either visiting geographically or even physically climbing the stairs. And at number 4, immersive installations. Not this one. This you probably came across on Instagram. Not how to do immersive installations. The Wonka one didn't go down very well, but I'd like to talk about one that did. One of the things you may have noticed when you're looking for things to do at the weekend is that post-COVID, there's been an explosion of supply to meet the demand for shared in-person experiences. So you'll have seen things like museums and exhibitions have been launching these big ticket exhibitions like the Tutankhamun Immersive Exhibition. You've got pop culture shows like ABBA Voyage, like Elvis Evolution. You've got immersive theatre, Punch Drunk, You Me, Bum Bum Train, hundreds of escape rooms, and you've got even dedicated immersive venues. So we're working with people like Outernet, Frameless, Lightroom. And all of that availability has created a kind of virtuous cycle. So consumers now have much more awareness thanks to those tech-enhanced experiences. And we tried to capitalize on that interest when we worked with London Zoo on this project. to, in a run-up to last summer's peak season, to do something that had never been done before, to put people underwater with the penguins. So we were lucky enough to spend a memorable day filming with these characterful creatures, rigging up a remote dolly over their playground to lower a custom 360 camera rig into the water, and then to film and produce an 18K quality immersive sequence that would do justice to the biggest immersive screen in Europe. And that was put in the Outernet at Tottenham Court Road, which, if anybody's been there, is very much worth a visit. So really, for us, a really exciting new canvas to showcase this kind of content. And this project earned over 500,000 impressions on TikTok and Instagram in just a few days, and loads of press and media coverage. So interest is high. All right, let's keep moving. In at number 3, live events. And in particular, where we've seen the greatest growth in demand is VR. So enhancing your events with VR, and actually interestingly, going around the exhibition hall today, it was really noticeable how quite a lot of organizations from a vast swathe of different industries are using VR to bring to life what it is they do. So in a B2B context, that's typically things like internal, external conferences, trade shows like this. In the world of B2C, that's more like campaigns around out-of-home, launches, events, and activations. Now, what's nice about VR, unlike any other content delivery mechanism, is that it offers ultimate escapism. It gives you the opportunity to control everything that someone sees and hears for however long they've got their headset on, which if you're a marketer is a total dream. Right? You get the chance to land a message, to give people an experience, and hopefully one they'll tell their friends about. And even simple content can be really impactful, because in VR, you get a sense of presence, that you're being somewhere that you really are not, stepping outside the walls of the venue. You get a degree of agency, you get the ability to control what you see that you don't get with other types of media that are kind of spoon-feeding you. And when we interact with content, we form emotional connections with the content and the story. And that is the third one, emotion. So experience is more than mere content trigger things like awe, delight, nostalgia, surprise, all of which helps lock in memories and associations. In this particular project, we worked with KFC and their parent company, Yum Group, to visualize how KFC might look in the future. So this is a view of how 2050 KFC might look, complete with AI-powered ordering kiosks, robot servers, and drone deliveries. So all of this was put into VR that you can navigate around and explore, and taken around the world to a whole calendar of events where it attracted more than twice as many franchisee sign-ups as the previous activation that they'd attempted, because it brought this story so sharply to life. Now, interestingly, going beyond VR, there's also more and more inquiries around things like immersive booths, where you can step inside with 4D sensory effects, and then things like holographic displays are also a really exciting delivery mechanism for this kind of experience. Okay, live events. In at number 2, training simulations. So more than any other use case, this is probably the one attracting the biggest budgets because it's highly effective and really scalable. So PwC, for example, did a really amazing report that found that VR trainees learn 2 times faster, were more focused, 3 times more confident to use their learnings, and 4 times more emotionally connected to the content than those who just use traditional training methods. But most importantly, they enjoyed it more and remembered it longer. So these kinds of initiatives using VR for training are typically led by HR departments, if you work with them, or L&D teams who are really looking at things like attraction, recruiting, assessment, onboarding, and training. They're usually looking to develop skills, so hard skills like health and safety awareness, construction, engineering, manufacturing processes, or even healthcare techniques. Or soft skills, so like things like public speaking, interviewing, or management. In this particular project, we worked with Pladis, the parent company of McVitie's, the biscuit people, to create a suite of onboarding modules for their new hires across all their departments. So if you go work for McVitie's, whether you're on the factory floor assembling biscuits, whether you are in the head office doing marketing, whether you're driving trucks, on day 1, you put on a VR headset, and you will be exposed to a whole load of content which really brings you into the world of Pladis. It brings to life the history of the company to give you a sense of legacy and inherited story. It tells you what you can expect from it as an employer. And ultimately, you can discover amazing facts about all its well-loved products. To give you an example, in case you didn't know this, it turns out in the UK, we consume enough digestive biscuits every 5 minutes to reach the height of Big Ben. So there you go. If you work for that company, that's a kind of interesting fact that you might want to take home with you. So the aim really is to help recruits feel like they've made the right decision and to start their career journey with an injection of pride in their products. On a personal note, I never want to see another digestive again, but it was fun while it lasted. All right. Finally, our number one, I should have done a bigger pause there, but anyway, number one, augmented reality. So specifically, this is around using 3D objects and animation to enhance a product experience. Now, you might have seen Otto earlier out in the exhibition hall. So this is something we did in collaboration with Kyle Partnership, where we used augmented reality to bring a little bit of this movie into the real world and make it interactive in a way that no traditional movie poster could do. More commonly, more practically, augmented reality's strongest use case is in bridging the gap between offline and online retail. So the kinds of things you might have seen would be things like virtual try-ons, typically shoes, glasses, watches, that kind of thing, or placing products in your space. So if you use Amazon, you'll see increasingly you have the opportunity to place, surprisingly nodding at there. Yeah, you can place the product in your space, an espresso machine, whatever it may be. Typically furniture, artwork, appliances, that kind of thing. And with consumers increasingly buying online at a distance, even simple tools like this can help them feel more confident in their purchasing decision. And that leads to fewer abandoned shopping carts, that leads to fewer returns, greater profits. In this particular case, we worked with a hygiene brand to create an AR tool that would allow any of their B2B buyers to place products in their space around them, again, increasing confidence, reducing returns. Other really good uses of augmented reality are things like product packaging. We were talking to a company out here who make bespoke labels, which they have like an NFC touch thing where you can touch your phone on a piece of packaging and then discover more content about that product. Augmented reality can do the same sort of thing. It also allows you to gamify brand experiences, so Pokemon Go being the classic example. And it also allows you to enhance things like events. So we've done stuff around with AR mirrors, so essentially large selfie screens where you can apply filters and effects to yourself to share, interactive walls, all of which are great for creating shareable content. That's our rundown of the top 5. Let's have a little look at what's next. So at the beginning, I talked about the tools of our trade, 360, VR, and AR. And we looked at that timeline showing how their adoption has changed. But an interesting question to ask is what will replace them when they become old news, as they inevitably will do? Now, the reason that augmented reality is at number 1 is because of its future potential. At the moment, augmented reality is somewhat hamstrung by the devices that we use, right? You're looking at the effect through a small 4-inch screen on your phone. But what about when smart glasses get good enough? When they do, and this is the latest Meta Ray-Ban display model, which actually will show you high-resolution color images floating in front of you in the world while an AI talks in your ear. When that gets good enough and spatial computing, i.e. wearable computers, becomes real, things like VR will melt away, as will a lot of the other hardware in our lives. And all content will become, in a way, augmented reality because it's overlaid on the world in front of us. The second tool that is starting to become interesting is called Gaussian splatting. So any geeks in the room might have come across this. This is something we've been playing with recently and is really exciting. But essentially what it does is it allows you to take images or video of real-world environments and turn them into really detailed, rich, textured 3D models. And in our world, that means you no longer have to decide between rigid, real-world capture or kind of abstract, cartoony, game-like experiences. You can actually merge the two and have a game-like experience where you can navigate through a virtual environment that looks and feels totally real, but you have all of the control and freedom that you would have in a game. You can even fly. And thirdly, AI worlds. So it won't be long before you'll be able to speak into being entire navigable immersive worlds. You can be the architect of your own fantasies. Google, if you might have read about this already, have already teased the launch of something called Genie 3, which is going to do exactly that. It's a Gen AI tool for immersive spaces. You can create unique personal experiences that feel real. And in the next generation, potentially can even become metaverses, that was talked about on this stage earlier today, where we could have shared experiences. All right, so we've looked at the trends, we've looked at the technology, we've looked at how since the pandemic and the subsequent hype, virtual and immersive has settled into place as an integral part of the business toolkit. But what does all this mean for you? I think this line from Coca-Cola's core brand strategy really sums it up. It's no longer sufficient to merely expose people to your brand. They're looking for an experience. They're looking for a sense of connectedness. Virtual can deliver that connection. It really has the power to move us geographically, to feel like we're in a different place than the one we're in, to move us intellectually to new states of decision-making or knowledge, and to move us emotionally, to help us feel something truly memorable. It can transform viewers into participants. And instead of telling people what your brand stands for, why not let them step inside and give them the controls to discover for themselves? So off the back of this, what I would do is invite you to do two things. In your work, think about your business. Think about what you could reimagine virtually and start there. And in your life, go try a new immersive experience. Talked about loads earlier, there's loads out there. And what I particularly encourage you to do is really notice how it makes you feel, because that's where the power of the technology really lies. Thank you very much.
On my sheet here, which I probably should have read out earlier, it tells us about some of the clients that you guys have got. And some big names on here. You know, we've got just, well, small fry like the United Nations. We've got Spotify, BBC, English Heritage, and there's a bunch more on here. I'm not going to read them all because, you know, your ego will explode. But, are any of those, can you tell us about one of those? What's the most exciting project that you've worked on?
That's a great question. Well, I can tell you about one we're working on now. So Ford, obviously car brand, we're in the middle of a big project with them. And it's all about telling the story of electric vehicles. So there's a lot of misunderstandings about electric vehicles, how they're manufactured. And so we're working with them to try and demystify that process and actually take people on a journey through the process from all the way from when 3D models of components are designed on a computer screen all the way through to them being put into cars. So we got to spend a whole day yesterday driving at speed around these crazy test tracks with cameras sort of sucker mounted to the side of the cars, which thankfully didn't fall off. So that's really fun. And that's really where the fun comes into it, is like working with interesting brands to tell stories that are going to hopefully change people's minds.
That's awesome. And so basically you just get to have fun all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, Jay. Everybody give him a massive round for that. Thank you very much indeed.